Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier classes related to the chapter salaries, we discussed about the segment of allowances and also one of the other important segments, that is retirement benefits, including gratuity, pension and leave salary. The next very big segment in this chapter will be definitely perquisites. But before going to that segment, let us quickly go through some of the small topics. Small, not just in terms of the size they occupy in the essay material, they do occupy a lot of space, but in terms of importance or in terms of the actual application, they are going to be there, but not that important to be knowing them in depth or in detail. We need to know the crux of it. We need to know the actual application of it. That would be enough. So one of such topics is provident fund and other benefits generally which are received upon retirement, retrenchment or voluntary retirement. So there are some other exemptions related to retrenchment compensation and voluntary retirement compensation under 1010B and 1010C. That also we'll discuss in today's session. But prior to that, let us focus on this area that is related to Provident Fund. So first let us understand what is Provident Fund, then we can understand the tax treatment thereof. What is Provident Fund is simply like a savings scheme. It's a kind of compulsory saving for the employees, and the employees on a monthly basis, periodic basis, will contribute to this Provident Fund, which cannot be considered as income at all, because that is not income. It is just the amount that is saved. It is your account, you are saving your own money, that cannot be called as income. But where the point comes is, the employer also will contribute to the benefit of the employee in the Provident Fund, and that employer contributing some money on behalf of the employee definitely has the nature of income, and ultimately that will be definitely required to be looked at about its tax treatment. So what is happening here is, first of all, every month a specified sum is deducted from the salary of the employee as his contribution. Generally also, employer contributes the same amount out of his pocket, and both these contributions will be invested by the Provident Fund. That is none of our business where they will invest. That is Provident Fund's their own decision. But point is, whatever the amounts which are deposited in the Provident Fund, there will be interest that will be earned on this Provident Fund amount, and that is credited to the account of the employee. So first of all, this account of Provident Fund is related to employee. He himself contributes certain amount of money every month. Employer also contributes the same amount in general to the same account every month. So this monthly amounts will be accumulated in the Provident Fund, and the fund will pay some interest also on this particular account, just like bank account. There need not be any great imagination about what is Provident Fund, just like a bank account, but it is a compulsory saving where the employer also will contribute, employee will also contribute. So is it compulsory for all? Definitely not. It is compulsory definitely for those people who are covered by the Provident Fund Act. So that is a different discussion. As far as Income Tax Act is concerned, how the Provident Fund amounts to be treated is our interesting point, or that is our area of interest, we can say. So what are all will be there in the Provident Fund account? So there will be definitely some balance in the Provident Fund account naturally. Whatever that credit balance in the Provident Fund account of an employee consists of what? His own contribution. Can we call that as income? No. Interest on his own contribution. Is that income? Yes, because it is interest. Employer's contribution. It is income. Interest on employer's contribution. That is also income. So any provident fund account will have all these types of amounts which are there in the credit of the account of employee. This is going on every month. So there are two layers we have to understand. When every month this type of contributions are made, or in a particular previous year there is contributions that are made, as far as the employee's contribution is concerned, absolutely it cannot be considered as income at all. Forget about it. Then question comes, what about employer's contribution? Is it income? Yes, it is income. If it is income, where is it taxable? It is taxable in the head of salaries only. Same way, interest on the employer's contribution, is it income? Yes, that is also income. Where is that taxable? That is also taxable under the head of salaries only. But how much taxable? That will depend upon what is the nature of the provident fund. That's what we will look at here. First of all, is it income or not? That we should identify. If it is income, that does not mean entire amount is taxable. Maybe there is an exemption available for that. We'll see what is that exemption related to amounts of employer's contribution and interest on employer's contribution. And interest on employee's contribution is a normal income that the employee earns every year, but that is not related to salary. It is just like any other bank interest. That is going to be treated as not salaries. If at all it is taxable, that will be treated as income from other sources. But definitely the point to be noted is employee's contribution itself can never be called as income. It is not income at all. It is his own money. He is saving in some account called as provident fund account. So there are two levels here. One, every year when these contributions happen, interest is accrued. And another important level where the accumulated balance is paid to the employee at the time of retirement or resignation generally. So the accumulated balance, whatever it is there to the credit of employee in the provident fund account, will be paid to the employee at the time of retirement or resignation. Of course, in case of death of the employee, the same amount will be paid to the legal heirs. Question comes, how to treat that money? This is lump sum money. At the time of retirement or death or resignation, the withdrawal of accumulated balance of the amount in the provident fund account is a lump sum receipt. That is clear. However, how that lump sum receipt has to be treated is our matter of concern. Right? So that is about provident fund, generally the understanding of it. Then what are the types of provident fund? We can just broadly classify them into these four categories. One is recognized provident fund. Generally anything that is given is normally recognized provident fund. Unrecognized provident fund, if it is not having any recognition. Then statutory provident fund, normally used for government employees. Public provident fund has nothing to do with employer at all. This is some savings account, just like a bank account. Anybody in the public can just like that contribute. So this public provident fund will not have any matching contribution from the employer because it is not having any relation to the employer-employee relationship. So public provident fund is altogether a different aspect. When we talk about provident fund, where contribution of employer and employee are made, those are only three types: recognized provident fund, unrecognized provident fund, and statutory provident fund. What is a recognized provident fund? We don't need that. We don't need that. Basically, what is the treatment of that is important. What is a recognized provident fund? Recognized is recognized, that's all. It doesn't need any further inquiry into what do you mean by recognized. It is recognized by law, that's all. So that is recognized provident fund. If fund is not recognized, it means it is unrecognized provident fund. Statutory provident fund is something generally which is particularly created for the government employees, as I said already. Only employees of government, railways, semi-government institutions, local bodies, universities, and recognized educational institutions, those employees will contribute to statutory provident fund. Employer, who is in general the government, also will contribute to this. statutory provident fund. So normally for a private sector employee, recognized provident fund is what we often look at. And this public provident fund has nothing to do with employer-employee relationship at all. This is open for anybody. And in general, this is more suited for self-employed people. Like for example, there is a businessman, a normal small businessman is there. He doesn't have any employer. He is doing his own business. He is a self-employed person. So there will not be anybody for him to provide for his retirement or give some lump sum amount after the retirement. So he can save some amount, set aside some amount so that after reaching a certain age, because he will not have retirement also, in his old age, maybe he'll have some support, because anyway, practically in India, there is no social support system. Social security is not there. Old people receive pensions, very few, very small amounts, but that too very specific segment of the society will receive, which means in general, the people have to plan for their old age in the young age itself. So they keep aside some amount. They can do that in a bank account also. They can do that in a PPF account also. So PPF account is a very long-term investment which will be made and which can be made by anybody. There is no restriction here. So salaried employees want to contribute, let them, you are welcome. Self-employed people want to contribute, you are welcome. But the question is here, is there any matching contribution? Is somebody giving any matching contribution? In countries like USA and all, social security is there where there will be a matching contribution from the government. If you contribute $10, government also contributes $10, and this will accumulate over a period of time, and after reaching an age of, let us say, 60, you can withdraw all that amount and be safe at that old age. That is social security, what is popular in developed countries. So here we don't have that in India. So we give the fantastic facility of people to save their own money in their own account, and we call it public provident fund, and we call it a facility. Their own money they are saving in their own account, but we are giving a name to it called as public provident fund. Nobody is going to put 1 rupee also in this. It is our own money. We have to put in our own bank account. If we do it in a bank account, we call it bank account. If we do it in a PPF account, it is public provident fund. That's it. But though it is not directly relevant here, since a lot of cases we will definitely encounter this, and in some of the cases we already encountered while discussing, if you remember, the residential status topic, some of the deductions under section 80, we need to know that. So one of them is 80C, which is related to investments. Now, is this PPF contribution eligible for 80C deduction? Yes, it is. But what is the maximum amount that is eligible is 1,50,000 rupees. So for 80C, the total amount of deduction that is eligible is 1,50,000 rupees, total amount, not only for PPF. And you would have seen in some of the questions earlier, there was 80C deduction given for life insurance premium that is paid. Life insurance premium that is also eligible for 80C. Contribution to recognized provident fund also, statutory provident fund also, public provident fund also is eligible for 80C. But when will this 80C come into picture? That is after computation of gross total income. So should we just do it in the head of salaries? No, we should not. Then what is gross total income? Always we should have that in the back of the mind. What is the process of computing total income? First we should determine residential status, then definitely each head of income. We need to compute the income of the SSC according to those provisions of that head of income, add all of them. Then clubbing provisions are applied if applicable. Then set off and carry forward applies if applicable. Then what we get is called gross total income. From that gross total income, there are deductions under chapter 6A, which are what we are popularly calling as section 80 deductions. One of them is 80C. Which is mostly related to investments or savings based deduction. So there will be a big list of them when we reach to the 80C, but before that itself we can understand some of the investments which are eligible for 80C. But once again I'm repeating, 80C should be given as a deduction only if the question is asking total income. If the question is asking only about salary or taxable salary, we are only a small portion of the total income calculation. We are only talking about one head of income. So that is one point to be noted. And another point also, because some of you have done this, I want to remind you, while calculating this salaries income, if at all a number comes, whatever number that is, that should not be rounded because this is not total income. Rounding should happen to total income, and total income is much later. Salaries, income from house property, PGBP, capital gains, income from other sources, all to be added, then clubbing, then set off carry forward, then we get gross total income, then deductions. After that, what we get is total income. That should be rounded. Salaries will be rounded, PGBP will be rounded, 100 times we round it. No, that many roundings we should not do. We should only do rounding to total income, not to head level income. So that is one more point to be noted. If at all the question asking only taxable salary, only we are looking at that head of income, not the total income of the SSC. Then ATC and all these things will not be required to be deducted. But if the total income is asked, yes, then we can have salaries. If at all the SSC has any other incomes, we will add them. Then we will deduct deductions under chapter 6A if applicable, one of which is ATC, and you already know two other such AT deductions also. What are those? AT TTA and AT TTB, related to interest on savings bank accounts for normal individuals, AT TTA up to 10,000 rupees as deduction, and then for senior citizens under AT TTB, interest on savings bank accounts or fixed deposits for senior citizens available up to 50,000 rupees under AT TTB. Like that, ATC is one of such deductions under chapter 6A, which has to be given after computing the gross total income. So why we are looking at that now? Because this public provident fund contribution is not at all income. First of all, it is SSC's own money. He is contributing to his own account in PPF. So there is no income point here. The point is, yes, the contribution to public provident fund is eligible for deduction, is what we are talking about. That's all. And that will naturally get some interest, no doubt. So because it's also like a bank interest, public provident fund account also will get some kind of interest. But those interests are also not taxable. So the interest that is going to be received on public provident fund is also not going to be taxed in the hands of the SSC. And at the end of the public provident fund, like interest is not going to be paid every year, it will be accumulated to the public provident fund. But in the year in which it is accumulated, it is not taxable. But after, let us say, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, whatever the time period, the SSC withdraws the lump sum amount of money from public provident fund. What happens to that? It will be exempt, naturally. Why? Because it is his own money he is withdrawing. He is not getting anything special there. It's not income. Then a question comes, sir, what about interest that is also a component which is there part of this accumulated amount? That is also exempt. So public provident fund facility is what? You deposit the money yearly, your own money, up to a maximum amount of 1,50,000 per annum. Over a period of time, you keep on doing this. And after some time, at the time of retirement or death, you can withdraw that money. At least that is generally for 15 years. This public provident fund minimum period itself is 15 years. So after 15 years, let us say you withdraw that, nothing will be taxable because it is your own money you are getting back. And even that interest that is accumulated on this public provident fund also is not taxable. That's it. So it's just a saving scheme, nothing to do with salaries chapter, nothing to do with income at all. So that is public provident fund. But whereas other three, the statutory provident fund, recognized provident fund, and unrecognized provident fund, these three have something related to the head of salaries. Why? Because there is employer's contribution to them also. Public provident fund is only one way, SSC contributing to his own account. But RPF, URPF or SPF, these three have SSC's contribution also and employer's contribution also. Then what is the point of taxation here? That's what we have to see. For public provident fund, this is not applicable because that is not having any employer's contribution. It is only the SSC's own contribution. Whereas RPF, URPF and SPF, employer's contribution also will be there. Let us understand the tax treatment one by one. We know this already also, actually nothing new. For a recognized provident fund, employer contributes some amount on behalf of employee. How much will be taxable? Any amount in excess of 12% of salary is taxable. We know this already. So this is there in the definition of salary also. It was there in the definition of income deemed to be received also under section 7. So that is the same thing coming once again here. Amount in excess of 12% of salary is taxable. That is about recognized provident fund. Let us go through them one by one rather than horizontally. Let us go vertically. First, let us focus on recognized provident fund and what is its treatment. Employer's contribution, what happens to that? In excess of 12% of salary, it will be taxable. Employee's contribution is not income, naturally, it is his own money. But is it eligible for ATC? Yes, sir, it is eligible for ATC. Interest credited. Interest credited, how much is taxable? The amount in excess of 9.5% per annum is taxable. Of course, under the head of salaries. So the interest credited to the recognized provident fund will be taxable when if that amount of interest is more than 9.5% per annum. So practically it will never happen because recognized provident fund will have whatever the amount of interest, that only will be given in the law also. Tomorrow let us say the recognized provident fund reduces the interest to 9%. Law will also change from 9.5 to 9. So practically in real life this will never exceed 9.5%, but doesn't matter to us. In problems anything is possible. We are talking imaginary things. So for problems purposes, if at all the interest that is credited to the recognized provident fund is in excess of 9.5% per annum, that excess amount is taxable. Can we interpret like this also? Employer's contribution is exempt to the extent of 12% of salary? Yes, because over and above that is only taxable. Can we also say that interest is exempt to the extent of 9.5% per annum? Yes, we can say that. In excess of 9.5% per annum interest and 12% of salary, employer's contribution, in excess of them only it will be taxable for recognized provident fund. Now coming to unrecognized provident fund. Naturally one more point comes, sir, what is unrecognized provident fund which is not recognized? What are the examples of that? There will not be any examples of that because in reality there will not be any unrecognized provident fund. Illegal, that is. How can there be an unrecognized provident fund in reality? Not possible. So this is not that really it will happen and actually these treatments are done in real life. These are created to prevent the formation of any unrecognized provident fund itself. Why is that? Because while the employer contributes to an unrecognized provident fund, nothing is taxable. Looks fantastic. It is better than recognized provident fund. Fully not taxable when employer contributes to unrecognized provident fund. So yearly it is not taxable. Then also yearly interest also is not taxable. Both are not taxable. Fantastic. This is better than recognized. Looks like. No. What happens is, in case of unrecognized provident fund, yearly these things are not taxable. Entire amount in lump sum, whatever it is received at the time of retirement, that will be taxable fully. That is why it is a postponement of taxability, but not that unrecognized provident fund is exempt. Unrecognized provident fund is not at all exempt from any tax. What is exempt is only recognized provident fund, that too to the extent of 12% of salary or to the extent of interest of 9.5% per annum. That is the exemption for recognized provident fund. Unrecognized provident fund doesn't have any exemption. Only that while the employer contributes yearly, it is not taxable. While the interest is credited yearly, that is not taxable. But at the same time, ATC deduction is also not available for employee's contribution towards unrecognized provident fund. That's it. That is unrecognized provident fund. So, but what is the essence we have to understand? Unrecognized provident fund will be taxable. Don't be too happy now because it is not taxable yearly. It will be taxable when the lump sum amount is received one time from the unrecognized provident fund. Now you can understand also why transfer of balance from unrecognized provident fund to recognized provident fund is also considered as income. It is taxable immediately when such transfer happens. That is deemed to be received also. Now you can understand why is that. Because unrecognized provident fund is not taxable during the contribution period, it will be taxable one shot at the time of withdrawal, we can say. That is unrecognized provident fund. See, statutory provident fund, we don't have to discuss anything here because exempt. That's all. Everything is there because it is government. Once again, government employees. Any contribution of employer exempt. Any interest on that exempt. Is it eligible for ATC? Of course, it is eligible. So, statutory provident fund is definitely in a better position exemption wise than recognized provident fund. Unrecognized provident fund will not have any taxability during the contribution period, but it will be taxable at the time of withdrawal. These are the three things related to employer and employee. But as we discussed already about public provident fund, it is purely eligible for deduction under ATC. It is not an income at all. It is only an investment or saving. And at the time of when every year the interest is credited to PPF, that is fully exempt. Nothing is taxable. PPF, nothing is taxable at all. That can be completely excluded from taxability. That is the nature of it, right? So that is about it. And what is important point here is what 12% of salary. When we say what is salary, nothing new, same thing what we already know. Basic plus DA, farming part of salary, plus commission as a percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. So the same definition what we used for HRA, the same definition what we used for leave salary exemption, same definition what we used for the gratuity exemption in relation to the employees who are not covered by payment of gratuity act. That is the same definition here also. Salary means basic plus DA, farming part of salary, plus commission as a percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. That's it. That is the yearly contribution of employer, exempt up to 12% of salary for recognized provident fund. Statutory provident fund fully exempt. For unrecognized provident fund, nothing is taxable. Employee's contribution eligible for ATC when it is recognized provident fund or public provident fund or statutory provident fund. Interest is taxable in excess of 9.5% per annum for recognized provident fund. Yearly it is not taxable for unrecognized provident fund. It is fully exempt for PPF also and statutory provident fund also. That is the essence of yearly what happens. Now what happens at the time of retirement? So there are so many things which are here. We don't need to really go through that. But simply speaking, what we can understand is whatever the withdrawal that is made at the time of retirement related to recognized provident fund as well as public provident fund as well as statutory provident fund, all are exempt from tax. Simple. So any amount withdrawn from the public provident fund is exempt from tax under section 1011. Same way, any amount withdrawn from recognized provident fund at the time of retirement, the accumulated balance whatever is withdrawn at the time of retirement is exempt. That is section 1011 and 1012. So there are certain conditions about withdrawal of amount from recognized provident fund. We don't need to again worry too much about it, but one point might be important, especially for MCQs. Main thing is condition when the accumulated balance withdrawn from the recognized provident fund will be exempt from tax. It is exempt. Condition is that the employee should have rendered at least 5 years of continuous service with the employer. At least 5 years of continuous service that person, employee, SC, should have rendered with his employer. Then whatever the amount of withdrawal that he makes from a recognized provident fund is fully exempt. If he has not served for 5 years, then there are some other little bit relaxations. He is retiring or resigning because of his ill health or because of the contraction or discontinuance of employer's business or any other cause beyond the control of employee. If then also that amount is exempt, then we have to look at it. If at all the amount, the entire balance standing to the credit is transferred to his individual account in any other recognized provident fund account maintained with new employer, then also it is exempt. Nothing will be taxable. If not, then it will be taxable. Or if this balance is transferred to the NPS account, that is called National Pension Scheme, which is notified under section 80 CCD? If yes, then also it is exempt. If not, it becomes taxable. So in order to become taxable, so many things are there. Which one we are talking about? Withdrawal of balance, withdrawal of accumulated balance from recognized provident fund we are talking. For statutory provident fund, it is fully exempt. For public provident fund, it is anyway fully exempt. For unrecognized provident fund, it will be taxable because earlier it was not taxed. So only point again is recognized provident fund, which has some bit of provisions related to them. What are those provisions? If the employee has served with employer for at least 5 years of continuous service, we don't have to look at anything. It is fully exempt. If not, look for further conditions. Whether the employment has been terminated due to reasons beyond the control of the employee, like his ill health or company itself getting closed, is it because of that? Then also it is fully exempt. If not, then we have to check whether the accumulated balance of the employee's provident fund account balance transferred to another recognized provident fund or national pension scheme. If yes, then also it is exempt. If no, then it will become taxable. That is the accumulated balance in recognized provident fund. What about unrecognized provident fund? Naturally, that will be fully taxable. But what extent is taxable? That has to be also understood. What is taxable? Employees' contribution portion of unrecognized provident fund cannot be taxable. Whereas interest on the employee's contribution is taxable under income from other sources. Whereas employer's contribution and interest thereon is taxed as salary. That is the treatment of withdrawal from unrecognized provident fund. Once again, unrecognized provident fund had no taxation at all yearly when the contribution was being made by the employer and employee. And employee was not eligible for ATC. Employer's contribution also was not taxable then. Interest on unrecognized provident fund yearly accumulation also was not taxable. All of that will be taxable at the end of maturity of unrecognized provident fund, wherein employee's own contribution he is withdrawing back, that is not income, so it cannot be taxable. Interest on the employee's contribution is income, but that will be taxable under income from other sources. Whereas employer's contribution and interest on such employer's contribution shall be taxable as salary at the time of withdrawal from unrecognized provident fund. That is the essence of this discussion of provident funds. Two layers we have to understand. First one at the time of contribution. Second one at the time of withdrawal. Now let's look at some of the questions related to it for practice. Illustration number 6 says that Mr. A retires from services on 31st December 2019 after 25 years of service. Following are the particulars of his income or investments for the previous year 1920. Okay. Look at the items one by one. The basic pay is 16,000 rupees per month for 9 months only because he retired on December 31st. DA is 72,000, which is 8,000 rupees per month for 9 months, but 50% of that only forms part of retirement benefits. Lump sum payment received from unrecognized provident fund is 6 lakhs. Lump sum payment, that is. Then deposits in PPF account. That is his saving, 40,000, eligible for ATC. Then, out of the amount received from unrecognized provident fund, the employer's contribution was 2,20,000. That is employer's contribution. And interest thereon was 50,000. Thereon means on the employer's contribution. Employee's contribution 2,70,000. That is not at all income. But interest on the employee's contribution was 60,000. What is the taxable portion of the amount received from unrecognized provident fund in the hands of Mr. A for the assessment year 2021? He is not asking compute his total salary, gross salary, etc. Only is asking about treatment of the amount of unrecognized provident fund which is received in lump sum upon his retirement. It's a straightforward, actually theory type question. Now, what is the treatment? 2,20,000 rupees plus 50,000 rupees will be treated as salary, which is 2,70,000 rupees. And 2,70,000 rupees of employee's contribution, his own contribution all these years is not taxable at all. Interest on the employee's contribution all these years is interest he has earned on his own money, that is taxable, but not under salaries because it is not coming from employer. So it will be taxable under income from other sources. That's it. Taxable under salaries is 2,70,000. Taxable under income from other sources is 60,000. That is what is mentioned here also. That is just a theoretical question, we can say, related to the employee Mr. A. But if the same question asks about compute his taxable salary, or let us say compute his total income. So total income calculation is different naturally because all of these items are there. So what all items will come here? Definitely. One, let us take all these things one by one. What are all items that will be included here? If at all. The same question, but taxable salary is asked. Total income is asked, not even salary. So look at this incomes one by one. So first of all, 16,000 rupees into 9 months. Already he has given that. That is 1,44,000 rupees. That will be there. That is basic. DA, 8,000 into 9 months, 72,000. That will be also taxable automatically. Then lump sum payment received from the unrecognized provident fund, 6 lakhs. In that, how much is taxable under the head of salaries? That will be only 2,70,000. We already know that. 2,70,000 is taxable as salary. Of course, there is something that will be taxable as income from other sources. That is different. That is 60,000. That is separate. So under salaries, it will be 2,70,000. And deposits in PPF account is not income. That is a saving actually. And the remaining amounts are all given already. So that's it. What is the total of income from salaries head here? So 1,44,000 and 72,000 and 2,70,000. So what is the total of all these? 144, 72 and 270. That comes to 4,86,000. Immediately deduct 50,000 from there, because that is standard deduction that is available under the head of salaries. So if you deduct 50,000, taxable salary will be 4,36,000. Now add to that the income from other sources. We don't know any other incomes he has, but this is income from salaries. That is 4,36,000. This is income from other sources. That is 60,000. Put together, it will be naturally 4,96,000. So that is the total amount of gross total income, we can say. From that, we will give a deduction of 40,000 because he has deposited 40,000 rupees in PPF account. So 40,000 can be deducted from that. So finally, what will be his total income? That is 4,56,000. That will be the final answer. If the same question asks for compute the total income of this SSC Mr. A. Like this, the questions can be definitely changed. Whatever the information given, we should be able to calculate it. So in this case, he has a salary income of 4,36,000 after computing basic plus DA. All DA is taxable, full DA taxable. And that portion of salaries portion of unrecognized provident fund withdrawal, that is 2,70,000. Adding all that and giving standard deduction, income from salaries was 4,36,000. Income from other sources, which is nothing but interest on his own contribution to the unrecognized provident fund, that was 60,000. Adding that, it is 4,96,000. Deducting 40,000 for ATC, which is deposit in PPF, we get 4,56,000 as the final income, that is taxable income of Mr. A. If tax liability is also asked, you can say it is nil because anyway it did not exceed 5 lakhs. That's it. So this is one question showing just the practice for unrecognized provident fund related treatment. Will your answer be different if the fund mentioned above was a recognized provident fund? Definitely yes, because this entire amount, whatever 6 lakhs rupees received, would be exempt. If this was a recognized provident fund, if at all, then this entire amount would have been exempt. But if it was a recognized provident fund, now it is unrecognized provident fund. If it was recognized provident fund, then nothing out of this 6 lakhs would have been taxable at all. Why? Because employee has served for 25 years. More than 5 years it is enough. 25 years is already too much. So entire amount is exempt, fully exempt. That is illustration number 7 and 6. Illustration number 8. Look at this question. This type of questions can be expected. Mr. B is working in XYZ Limited and has given the details of his income for the previous year 1920 are required to compute his gross salary from the details given below. Gross means before deductions. Taxable means after deductions. These names you have to be clear. Basic salary is 10,000 per month. DA is 8,000 per month, out of which 50% is forming part. Commission as a percentage of turnover is 0.1%. Turnover during the year was 50 lakhs. Bonus and gratuity are given. His own contribution to the recognized provident fund is given. Employer's contribution to recognized provident fund is also given. Interest accrued in the RPF is 13% per annum, that is 13,000 rupees. That is also given here. So here we are supposed to calculate what? Gross salary only. Only salary. He is not asking total income or anything like that. So we can do one by one. But before this, let me tell the most common mistake that people do. The moment they see gratuity, they assume that employee has retired. Nowhere it was mentioned, sir. What is your dream about employee being retired here? Where it was mentioned he retired. He earned this income throughout the year. That gratuity 25,000 was received while he was in service, which is fully taxable in all cases. So don't go by names. Gratuity given, so he is retired. Who said gratuity means it has to be retired only? Not necessarily. From gratuity we cannot say he is retired. If he retired, then we have to treat gratuity according to section 1010. So that is a point to be noted. While reading itself, most of the people would have been under a wrong impression that he has retired. But he has not retired. He is still working. He has been working. He is still working with XYZ Limited. That is a case we have to first understand. But all that we need to do is computation of the gross salary, what we need to do. So 10,000 rupees per month is what we have. So definitely we need to have basic salary, that is 10,000 per month means 1,20,000. That is basic salary. That is fine. Then DA 8,000 into 12. That will be 96,000. That is DA. Fine. Commission as a percentage of turnover, and turnover was 50 lakhs, what he achieved, and 0.1% was the commission. That comes to only 5,000 rupees commission. That is commission on turnover, which is taxable anyway. 0.1% commission was mentioned. So 50 lakhs into 0.1%. Then bonus, taxable of course, 40,000 rupees. Gratuity taxable, because it is received during service. These are all okay. His own contribution to RPF doesn't matter. It cannot be taxed. That is his own money he is saving. So that should not be included in the income. It is not income first of all. But employer's contribution to RPF, 20% of his basic salary. This is the most important point. Contribution towards RPF for employer is reality. Reality is what? 20% of his basic salary. That means how much? 1,20,000 into 20% means 24,000 rupees was the real contribution of employer to the recognized provident fund. That is employer's contribution to recognized provident fund, really 24,000. That is different. That is fact. That is not something according to the Income Tax Act. 20% of basic, 20% of basic, 20% of 1,20,000, 24,000. That is reality. But Income Tax Act says gratuity, employer's contribution to recognized provident fund will be exempt up to 12% of salary. Then salary here is not basic. Here salary means basic plus DA farming part of salary plus commission as a percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. So what is salary for the purpose of computation of exemption, let us say, related to contribution of employer to recognized provident fund? What is salary? Basic, okay, 1,20,000 plus DA farming part of salary, half of 96,000 means 48,000, okay, fine, plus basic plus DA farming part of salary plus commission as a percentage of turnover, which we know already, that is 5,000, which means what is salary here? 1,20,000 plus 48,000 plus 5,000 means 1,73,000. 1,73,000. Okay, 1,73,000 is salary. How much is exempt under Income Tax Act? 12% of that is exempt, which means how much? 20,000. 20,760 is exempt. That has to be calculated carefully. So that's what we calculated. 20,760 is exempt according to Income Tax Act. So don't just directly take 12% of basic. Contribution could be anything. That depends upon employer-employee contract. But exemption according to Income Tax Act we have to give. That is how much? 12% of salary. And what is salary here? Basic plus DA, farming part of salary plus commission as a percentage of turnover. Once we do that, how much is taxable here? That comes 3,240. That will be here 3,240 taxable portion of employer's contribution to recognized provident fund. That should be included also in the salary, and these other things are all working notes. Now, another point, interest accrued in the RPF 13% per annum, that is 13,000. It's relatively easier calculation. 9.5% per annum is exempt, but interest is actually accrued at 13% per annum, which is equivalent to 13,000. If 13% is representing 13,000, how much will be representing 9.5%? That is 9,500. Naturally, how much will be taxable? The remaining excess is 3,500. Up to 9.5% per annum, it is exempt, not taxable. So 13,000 is representing 13%. That means 9.5% will be represented 9,500. That means the remaining amount is taxable. These are the total items which are all part of gross salary. So how much that comes to? Calculate that. 120, 96,000, 5,000, 40,000, 25,000, 3,240 and 3,500. Total comes to 292,740. 2,92,740. That is what is going to be the gross taxable salary. That's what is gross salary that he has mentioned. That is 2,92,740. 292,740. Let us see that. It should be naturally the same. That is 2,92,740 gross salary. And he has not asked for taxable salary, so we don't need to give standard deduction of 50,000. That is about provident fund related provisions during service, while employer-employee contribute towards provident fund, and after retirement when lump sum amounts are received. Both treatments have to be very clear for everybody. Now, there is one more small discussion related to employer's contribution towards a pension scheme that is called as a national pension scheme, where employer contributes certain amount to national pension scheme on behalf of employee. What happens to that? Simply that first of all becomes taxable, and it will be eligible for a deduction under 80CCD, which we will discuss later. So 80CCD and all, we don't need it now. We will come to that later. There is no salaries portion that is included in that. Common point you have to always keep in mind, any amount for that matter, any amount that employer contributes on behalf of employee always will be taxable. If it is exempt specifically, then only it is exempt. Where it was exempt? For statutory provident fund, it was exempt. For unrecognized provident fund, it was not taxable at the time of contribution. For recognized provident fund, employer's contribution was exempt up to 12% of salary. That only exactly we have to apply. Like that, any other thing, if it is given, employer has contributed to the bank account of employee, so what? It is taxable. Why employer will contribute to the bank account of employee? If he contributes, means he is giving money to employee indirectly. That is fully taxable. There should not be any doubt on that. Any amount paid by employer on behalf of, in the name of employee, is salary, it is income, so it is taxable. That's all. After all these computations, after computation of gross total income, there will be certain deductions under section 80. We know that. We will come to them later. Some of them we know already. 80C is one of them we know. 80TTA and 80TTB are those which we know. There will be like that many deductions later. We will come to them later. Then it will be easier to understand. Now, moving on to the next segment, that is profits in lieu of salary, that is defined in section 17.3. There is no need to go through each and every line here or definition of it, but generally, at a broader basis, what are these things? These are also taxable, right? That's all. What name we give, how does it matter? We call them allowances, taxable. We call them retirement benefits, taxable, unless they are exempt. Same with allowances also. Unless they are exempt, they are always taxable. Allowances are taxable. Retirement benefits are taxable. Profits in lieu of salary are taxable. Perquisites are taxable. Everything is taxable. But there is no need to discuss about those things which are taxable, because they are anyway taxable. What are those things which are taxable here? Any compensation received upon the termination of his employment, basically taxable. Sir, is there any exemption? Yes, there is. We will discuss that. If any compensation is given on account of the modification of the terms and conditions of employment, employer is giving some compensation because of modification of the terms and conditions of employment, naturally taxable. Nothing to discuss. Payment from provident fund or other fund, of course they will be taxable also, as we discussed just now. And other things already we have discussed related to exemptions. So there is nothing that specially this section 17.3 tells, but yes, what it does is it tells us various amounts as taxable amounts. Those are all called as profits in lieu of salary. That's only a definition of profits in lieu of salary. Okay, so that is about the treatment. Simply taxable. What is there to discuss in that? There is nothing. When there are exempt, anyway we know that gratuity exempt, yes. Pension exempt, yes, to some extent. Like 1010B, retrenchment compensation, we will discuss that. Contribution or amount received from a public provident fund, yes. From a recognized provident fund, exempt, yes. Any amount from approved superannuation fund, yes, that is exempt. HRA, exempt. So these are all exemptions which we have to focus on. So taxability, there is nothing to discuss. Taxability is taxability. So there is nothing specially to discuss about profits in lieu of salary. Just a general definition. Any amount received by the employee as a compensation on account of termination of his employment, or as a compensation as to the modification of terms and conditions of employment, is taxable as profits in lieu of salary. That's all, nothing else. Now, any other amounts, something like, let us say, key man insurance policy. This will be there in many chapters also. Key man insurance policy is a policy taken by employer on the life of important people in his organizations. That means naturally employees. And if the employee did not die, but he received some amount upon the maturity of the key man insurance policy, that will be taxable naturally as salary for employee. So any sum received by an SSE under a key man insurance policy, including the sum allocated by way of bonus on such policy, shall be taxable under the head of salaries. What name we give it? We call it profits in lieu of salary. What is the big deal? End of the day, it will be taxable. As profits in lieu of salary, will it be taxable? As perquisite, it will be taxable. As allowance, it will be taxable. We don't need that. It is taxable, and it is called profits in lieu of salary as defined under section 17.3. That's it. That is profits in lieu of salary from the existing employer. This already we discussed. Any amount which is received otherwise. Anything means anything. Like this, all open-ended statements will be given. So if any amount is given are received by the SSE from any person before joining employment also, after cessation of employment also, it will be taxable. This also we discussed earlier. We said there should be employer-employee relationship. We never said that employer-employee relationship should exist during the previous year. So if there is a prospective employer who gives some money before even joining his employment, that is also taxable as salaries, called profits in lieu of salary. After cessation of the employment also, if some money is received from an employer, that is also taxable, whether it is lump sum or periodical. So basically this entire section talks about taxability of many things, which are generally also, we know they are taxable, nothing special, but certain points are given, 5 points are given as definition of profits in lieu of salary. What are those? Compensation on account of the termination of the employment, compensation on account of the modification of the terms and conditions of employment, payment from provident fund or the other fund, to the extent they are not exempt, they will be taxable. Any amount received from Keyman insurance policy will be taxable, of course, if it is received by employee. And any lump sum payments received by the employee from the present employer anyway is salary, even if it is received from a past employer or even from a future employer, that also shall be taxable as profit in lieu of salary as defined in section 17.3. So just numbers wise, if you remember, this is section 17.1 was the definition of salary, 17.3 is the definition of profits in lieu of salary, and the remaining 17.2 is what we will look at under the segment of perquisites later. That's it. That is about some of the aspects which are sideline aspects, we can say, important but not line to line. Broader level understanding would be enough. But wherever exemptions are there, definitely calculations have to be absolutely known, and these exemptions definitely are going to be important, particularly for MCQs. Retrenchment compensation is exempt. See, a lot of other things are there. We don't need to know what sections of Disputes Act, Industrial Disputes Act and all. Don't worry. All that we need to know is under which section this is exempt under Income Tax Act. Retrenchment compensation. Retrenchment means termination of employment. Termination of employment done by employer, and employer is giving some lump sum compensation to the employee as retrenchment compensation. How will that be exempt under section 10.10b? So that is the point here under 10.10b. So here, what is the statutory limit under Income Tax Act? You can just remember that. That is about 5 lakhs rupees. 5 lakhs rupees is the maximum amount that is allowable as deduction or exemption rather under section 10.10b. Or we can take 15 days average pay multiplied with completed years of service and part thereof in excess of 6 months, which has been also mentioned in Industrial Disputes Act. Looks like something familiar? Yes, it is. It is nothing but 15 by 26 into number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months into, main problem here is not last drawn salary, because if you recollect the amount calculated for those employees covered by payment of Gratuity Act, the calculation was similar. To what extent similar? 15 by 26 is similar, and number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months is similar. But there it was last drawn salary. Here it is average pay, 15 days average salary multiplied with number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months or 5 lakhs rupees, whichever is lower, is given as exemption under section 10.10b. That is retrenchment compensation calculation. So in other words, 15 by 26 into number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months into average pay. But there is a problem here also. What is average pay? Average pay or average salary earlier, what we know, was different. That was for 10 months average salary. But here average pay is different. That is, if it is a monthly paid workman, the average pay means the average of 3 complete calendar months. That means 3 months average salary we have to take. Complete calendar months, whatever they are. For example, if an employee has retired in say June 29th, June salary we cannot take. We have to take prior to that. Complete calendar months we need, right? So 3 complete calendar months means definitely the month of retrenchment will be ignored. Prior to that, 3 months average salary we can take. What if the employee is a weekly paid person? Then it will be 4 calendar weeks. 4. 3, 4. What if the employee is a daily paid person? Then it will be 12 full working days. This is wrong. This is a mistake here. Print mistake. It is not working weeks. It should be working days. How many? 12 full working days average salary, average pay we have to take. Preceding the date on which the average pay becomes payable, if the workman had worked for 3 complete calendar months or 4 complete weeks or 12 full working days, as the case may be. If at all, it sees these type of calculations cannot be made, then average pay shall be calculated as the average of wages payable to a workman during the period he has actually worked. So these are all details once again under Industrial Disputes Act, daily paid, weekly paid, monthly paid, all these things generally not required, exceptionally only required, but broadly we will calculate those people who get monthly pay, which means we have to take average salary for 3 months prior to the date of retrenchment, we can say. So that is the point to be noted. And what is the salary? Here actually the word is not used salary, it is wages. 15 days average pay it was used. Whatever the word it may be, what does it mean? It means all the remuneration payable which can be expressed in the form of money, whether express or implied, whether fulfilled or not, whether be payable to workman in his employment or work done in such employment, including allowances like DA, or including the value of any house accommodation or any other facilities that are given, including any travel concession or any commission payable for the promotion of sales or etc. So salary is a very broader definition here, but what it does not include is bonus and contribution to a retirement benefit scheme, something like contribution to provident fund, and a gratuity payable upon the termination of his service. These 3 things are not to be included in salary. So this is a very rare scenario for 1010B calculation. If salary is required to be calculated here, everything that is possible to be expressed in the form of money can be included. That is the point here. So that is the broadest possible definition of salary for computation of retrenchment compensation exemption under section 1010B. So there are only 2 things. One thing is already statutory amount, which is 5 lakhs. Second thing is 15 by 26 into average salary, let us say, into number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months. So what is average salary? Average of 3 months salary, or average of 4 weeks salary, or average of 12 days salary, depending upon the nature of employment. Then what is salary? Everything, almost everything except bonus or contribution of employers, contribution to the recognized provident fund or any other retirement benefit schemes, or any lump sum amounts received like gratuity. So those are not included in salary. Other than that, every amount that can be expressed as money, including perquisites also is included in the definition of salary for this purpose. So that is a broad definition of wages or salary for the purpose of computation of exemption under 1010B, because the Income Tax Act has not defined this first point. That is a problem. Income Tax Act has what it said. It said amount calculated in accordance with the provisions of Industrial Disputes Act, it said. So whatever Industrial Disputes Act says, we have to take it. Income Tax Act was lethargic in defining how to calculate this exemption. It only said whatever the amount as defined in Industrial Disputes Act, that itself will be taken. So there is no option for us but to go and look at Industrial Disputes Act, which will not be like in Income Tax Act. Actually, the way it will be drafted will be completely different. So it has so many things which will not be in the same language of Income Tax Act. We don't need to worry about it. All that we need to know is the exemption calculation. Simply speaking, 15 by 26 into number of completed years of service or part thereof in excess of 6 months multiplied with 3 months average salary. That's all. That is exemption under section 1010B. Right? So that is the point to be noted related to 1010B. Then 1010C is also another exemption which is related to voluntary retirement compensation or voluntary retirement receipts. That is called compensation on voluntary retirement, VRS, what is popularly called voluntary retirement scheme. While taking that VRS, lump sum amount is received by employees and that is exempt under section 1010C when there are so many conditions. Once again, we don't need to worry about that. The eligible undertakings list is given, and if you look at that, almost everything is eligible. So we don't need to worry about eligible undertakings, who are all eligible to get this exemption. That point of details we don't need. So many things are there. When we say public sector company or any other company, so what else is there? Public sector company or any other company. So company, definitely yes. But only problem comes here what? 1010C, exemption cannot be claimed by an employee of a partnership firm. No, answer is no. Can 1010C exemption be claimed from the employee of a sole proprietorship business? Answer is no. Definitely that has to be at least a company. That is one point we can draw from all this list. Company is important. Local authority, cooperative society, those are okay. But not a partnership firm, but not a sole proprietorship, that is for sure. And what is the maximum amount of exemption? It will never exceed 5 lakhs rupees. Just like 1010B, 1010C also has the same limit of 5 lakhs rupees. That is the amount of exemption that can be claimed under section 1010C for voluntary retirement compensation received by employee from the employer. That is 5 lakhs rupees. Then there are certain guidelines which are specified in Rule 2BA which have to be followed, which are definitely to be followed by all these eligible employers. But look at the variety here. Undertakings are employers, but who is getting exemption is not employer. Who is getting exemption is the employee of those undertakings. So the employee has to belong to any of these undertakings, then only employee can claim exemption. But restriction is on the employers, that these are only the eligible undertakings, the employees of whom will be eligible for exemption under section 1010C, and maximum amount of exemption cannot exceed 5 lakhs rupees. And Rule 2BA has to be followed. What are the rules? Broadly, you can just go through that. No need to really remember seriously. First one is this voluntary retirement scheme, whatever is the scheme which has to be given should be applied to an employee who has completed at least 10 years of service already or completed 40 years of age. It should be applicable to all employees who have completed 10 years of service in the employment of that employer or at least an age of 40 years of age. That is first rule. And it should apply to every employee, all employees of the organization. You cannot selectively choose that, okay, these 4 people are creating problem for me, I will give them a voluntary retirement scheme. No, that is not a voluntary retirement scheme. It is a scheme which is applicable to all employees, whatever name called. So everybody should get this scheme benefits. That is how the employer should make it available to all employees. And in general, after this scheme is implemented, there should be an overall reduction in the number of employees of the organization. That should be another point to be observed. Why is that all these conditions are there in Rule 2BA? Imagine if an employer really doesn't want his all employees existing to be present. So he may sack 200 people and then he can recruit another say 100 people. It has reduced his strength, that is okay. But what if he has sacked 200 people but he has recruited 500 people? Then it has increased the strength. Then this exemption is not available for those 200 employees who were sacked or who were given voluntary retirement benefit. So the name is voluntary, but who takes the decision to get retired is employee only, but who is asking the employee to take a decision is employer. So employer is giving a scheme of voluntary retirement called VRS, and employees, some of the employees are choosing that. When they choose that, they get to they tend to get some of the compensation. That is what is exempt we are talking about under section 1010 C. And that maximum exemption is 5 lakhs rupees, as we already discussed. And these are all practical conditions. We cannot check them, but theoretical question of Rule 2BA, if it is asked, these conditions have to be written. What are those? The scheme should be applicable to for all those who have completed 10 years of service or attained 40 years of age. And this should be applicable to all employees, not only to a particular cross-section of employees. For everybody in the organization, this scheme should apply, whether it is workers or executives, except directors. Directors need not be given this scheme. And this scheme should result in an overall reduction of the existing strength of the employees. Strength means here number of employees. And the vacancy caused by this voluntary retirement should not be filled up. You remove some people and recruit some more people. No, that is not possible. If that happens, then it is not called voluntary retirement. Then Rule 2BA is not followed. It will not be eligible for 1010C also. Then the retiring employee of the company shall not be employed in another company belonging to the same management. So you retire from Tata Steel and join Tata Motors. You can do that, no problem. But then exemption under 1010C you cannot claim because Rule 2BA is violated. So according to Rule 2BA, if employee retires or resigns from this company, he should not join another company belonging to the same management. That is also point here. These are all practical things. None of them we can check. They are all theoretical questions, theoretical points. But one thing what we can calculate is this. This is the only point which is relevant and more useful for us. The amount receivable on account of voluntary retirement or separation of the employee must not exceed. What is that? First, the amount equivalent to 3 months salary for each completed year of service, or salary at the time of retirement multiplied by the balance months of service left before the date of his voluntary retirement or superannuation. In other words, if employee retires now for 40 years, let's say he has still 20 more years of service. Imagine, because 60 years assuming to be the superannuation time, 20 years of service means how many months of service he still has? That comes to 240 months of service he still has. That should be multiplied with the salary at the time of retirement, that is last run salary. That is the second point. So salary at the time of retirement multiplied by the balance months of service left before the date of his retirement or superannuation. So he is normally supposed to retire at 60. But now because he is taking voluntary retirement at 40 only, here he still has 20 more years of service. So 20 into 12, 240 months remaining service which he has foregone. Multiply with the salary at the time of retirement. That is one calculation. Second calculation is for every completed year of service, only completed year of service, whatever the completed year of service, multiplied with 3 months salary, not 3 months average salary, 3 months salary. So whatever the salary at the time of retirement, multiply with 3, multiply with the completed years of service. That is the first calculation. Second calculation is remaining months of service multiplied with whatever the salary at the time of retirement. So that is the computation of exemption for 1010C. Why do we say this is computation of exemption also? Because this here clearly given, the amount here under Rule 2BA cannot exceed any of these two. It cannot exceed any of these two. R is the word used. So which can it exceed one of them is okay. Any one of them it can exceed. So which one we can take here is whichever is higher can be taken, because the word used is R. Whichever is higher can be taken as a basis. This can be compared with 5 lakhs rupees which was given in the law, and whichever is lower between these two can be taken as exemption under section 1010C. So how section 1010C exemption can be calculated? We can take 3 points. First point, completed years of service multiplied with 3 multiplied with last drawn salary. Second point, number of remaining months of service multiplied with last drawn salary. Third point, 5 lakhs. First of all, first 2 points, whichever is higher we have to compare, and that has to be compared with the 5 lakhs. Whichever is lower will be considered as exemption under 1010C. And what is salary here? That is same. nothing new here. We know that already. That is what? Basic plus DA, forming part of salary, plus commission as a percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. That is the same definition of salary for voluntary retirement compensation under 1010C. Let us apply this for a calculation related to illustration 9. Mr. Datta received voluntary retirement compensation of 7 lakhs rupees after 30 years and 4 months. Here also you have to understand, when we used this, here we have never used part thereof in excess of 6 months. We only said completed years of service, which means number of months after completed round years should be ignored. Just 30 years only should be considered. Even though it is 30 years and 8 months also, we should still consider it as 30 years only. And look at this importantly. He has 6 years of service still left. So that means how many months he still has service? 6 years into 12. That means 72 months of service is still there for him. And at the time of voluntary retirement, he was drawing a basic salary of 20,000 per month. Okay, that is basic. And DA, which forms part of the pay, is 5,000 per month. So that should be also part of salary, 25,000. Compute his taxable voluntary retirement compensation, assuming that he does not claim any relief under section 89. We'll come to that 89 and all. That is completely a different discussion. Here we just need to find out exemption under 1010C, that's all. What are the two things first we have to calculate? Number of completed years of service into last drawn salary into 3. Do that first. What is the number of completed years of service? Number of completed years of service is 30 years. Multiplied with last drawn salary is 25,000. That is given basic plus DA, forming part of salary, into 3. Because 3 months salary for each completed year of service is said. So 25,000 into 3 into 30 means 22 lakhs 50,000 is the first calculation, we can say. 22 lakhs 50,000. Second calculation. Number of months remaining service, 72 months. We already know that. Multiplied with last drawn salary per month, that is 25,000. That comes to how much? 72 into 25,000. That comes to 18 lakhs. Which are big amounts. In this, whichever is higher, that is 22 lakhs 50,000 is higher. That can be compared with 5 lakhs. And whichever is lower, naturally 5 lakhs is lower. So naturally how much will be exempt? 5 lakhs is exempt. How much he received? 7 lakhs. How much is taxable? 2 lakhs. That's it. So 7 lakhs is received, 5 lakhs exempt, 2 lakhs taxable. But you cannot just directly get it. You have to show that in the calculation. One calculation is 22 lakhs 50,000, as we calculated already. One calculation is 18 lakhs, whichever is higher. That has to be compared with 5 lakhs, whichever is lower. So 5 lakhs only is given as exemption. So that remaining 2 lakhs becomes taxable. That is section 1010C. So sequence wise, if you observe, the exemptions related to retirement benefits are lump sum payments. There is 1010 gratuity, 1010A commuted pension, 1010AA leave salary, 1010B retrenchment compensation, 1010C voluntary retirement compensation. Each of these provisions have to be noted very clearly. And these particular two aspects, 1010B and 1010C, are more important for MCQs. And contribution to the provident funds, recognized, unrecognized, statutory, public provident fund, what happens at the time of contribution and what happens at the time of withdrawal, both have to be thoroughly known, and those will be also important in main questions. These are some of the sideline topics, small topics we can say, not a segment as such, but we cannot leave them also. Such type of topics we discuss it today. So with that, we have completed everything in this chapter except perquisites. So perquisites is going to be the biggest segment of this chapter, which we will discuss in the coming class onwards. But prior to that, every provision that we are learning, everybody should be reading them, writing the summary of them, and be thorough with those provisions. Then only solving problems will be easier later. So with that, we'll conclude all the aspects related to provident funds, allowances, and retirement benefits, including retrenchment compensation and voluntary retirement benefit. So next session will continue with perquisites related discussion, how to value perquisites. Till that time, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.